Guys, so after a day and a half of technical difficulties, we are here. Yeah, it's been quite some time. Let's past 36 hours, but I tried recording this video. I had an entire 45 minutes done. As soon as everything was good, and then the final video, what's it called? The final video crashed my laptop. So I had the screen recording, but then not the actual audio. But then I realized that because this is the first time you see me as this. So I didn't know my laptop could do this. So I didn't even need to do this. That means all the hours of editing I didn't have to do. But it's like, it is what it is, honestly. So, yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. And how the corporate token equitably distributes wealth. And here we have our two different topics for today in the table of contents. So, dependence on the context, the idea of equitable wealth distribution will have different meanings. Colloquially, this phrase invokes ideas of socialism, high taxes for the wealthy and corporations, universal basic income (UBI), corporate social responsibility (CSR), etc. With nearly all conventional ideas, a singular trait/flaw is apparent. There's typically always one party that must financially sacrifice more than what they directly gain from the wealth distribution scheme. With socialism, entrepreneurs must sacrifice private ownership of assets to workers. With high taxes, the affluent and successful must subsidize the poor. With UBI, those funds ultimately come from taxes of some sort. With CSR, who is there to enforce or regulate how much responsibility a corporation has over society. All these ideas are definitely morally sound, but they lack economic understanding of incentives. No matter which way one tries to spin it, if the funding of a wealth distribution system requires the forceful or non-voluntary seizing of funds, that system will always result in minimal participation, and there will be economic incentivization to avoid such a program at all costs, essentially. And you understand that with carbon taxes, if you know what those are. Thus, this also always results in a necessary third-party enforcer, which typically results in dissent from those whose funds are taken away, and over-reliance or over-exploitation from those who receive those funds. So you can understand this with, for example, welfare benefits. Sometimes some people purposely go out of their way to not better themselves to be able to keep those welfare funds. So this is an example of that. And then also, because people do that, that's the reason why rich people aren't really lining up first to give taxes, because it's like it encourages this type of behavior. So now that we've discussed the colloquial understanding, the economic understanding of equitable wealth distribution underneath the crypto globalist mindset, which is the whole ideology that this program is built around, is a system that's able to 1. Recognize, 2. Accurately account for, 3. Collect, and 4. Distribute wealth once it's created equitably to each and every stakeholder involved, ideally in an automatic fashion. These might seem like a lot, but the corporate token tackles this list by dissecting A, what wealth is, B, where it's created, and C, the medium which transference and distribution is most optimal. So, A, what is wealth? The crypto globalist understanding of wealth is the following. Wealth, the hardened form of income for individuals, and revenue for businesses, which is readily liquefiable for future expenses. The word harden is used because income and wealth are just two forms of money, no different than how water and ice are just two forms of H2O. The majority of people around the world get compensated via income, which is probably like 90-95% plus, while a few people, such as celebrities, for example, or important figures, might get compensated via equity or perpetual royalties, etc. Traditional economics splits, or B, where is wealth created? Traditional economics splits the economy between the government, firms and businesses, and the household. The household just refers to the average citizen. While wealth can be created in multiple avenues. The arena that involves all three stakeholders the most is through commerce, in my opinion. And so this isn't my chart. This is a chart I found online, but it does a really good job of exemplifying how money flows, at least how I studied it back in school. So we're going to be looking at this consumption path, and we're going to be also looking at this private savings path to the financial markets. And financial markets just means like, could be the most easiest one is the stock market, but it could be anything from crypto, bonds, options, futures, etc. Commerce is where the citizen consumes tools and education to improve one's economic value, and it's where business collects profit for providing its goods and services in favorable conditions dictated by the market to use for further investment or to increase private wealth. And so this bullet point here is just in respect to building wealth, not just, generally speaking. So compared to the likelihood of disposable income being taxed, MPT, invested, MPI, or saved, MPS, and MP means marginal propensity to. So the propensity of income being used for commerce or consumption, MPC, is typically always the largest. And so when you do this calculation, you'll see here that and disposable income just means all the income available to you in terms of your top line income, whereas really you would understand this as colloquial speech as whatever you have on the side. This means total. So when you do the math here, typically MPC is usually the largest. Using 1 as the value for disposable income, MPC values typically range from 0.2 to 0.6. This is what I found within the United States. So this is going to be a little bit different, but circumstantially, this value is immensely dependent on personal financial reality. So it's hard to find all these figures for each and every single country around the world, but realistically speaking, people in places in third world countries, for example, it's very unlikely that they might even have the financial infrastructure to be able to invest. A lot of people are unbanked still, and globally speaking. So when you compare this on a global scale, these figures are usually tame. And you can assume at bare minimum half is going towards consumption, and consumption includes rent, it includes groceries, it includes debts, that type of stuff. So just put this with an asterisk here. So the underlying question that arises is, if most of average and lower income salaries on a global scale goes towards the consumption of goods and services in comparison to savings, why do we have an economic model where wealth is created through personal savings, such as with stocks or with real estate? This question and sentiment is most glaringly credible when analyzing certain statistics about wealth distribution by income level. And so this is where we go back to our chart here, where you might be able to, well, I guess now I can definitely yeah, now I can see. You see here, the road for consumption from households, which just means the citizen, remember, is way larger than obviously private savings. But you see here that our understanding of wealth, at least within the capitalist Western mindset, is typically through stocks or it's typically through real estate. Why is it that you have to use private savings to create wealth when there's way more money on the consumption side? And pretty much the argument is saying that wouldn't it be a far more efficient economic system if we were able to create wealth every single time someone wanted to consume something versus when everybody's able to save something? That's basically the question there. Hopefully the lights in the back isn't too crazy, but according to the New York Times, the Federal Reserve's 2019 survey of consumer finances highlights, although the distribution of income is unequal in the United States, ownership of financial assets in general and stocks in particular is even more so. The article goes on to mention, out of the participants surveyed, the top 90 to 100th percentiles own 92% of stocks, while the bottom 50 percentiles owns 0%. So here's a little screenshot from that article. Overall equities just means anything stock plus everything else, whereas just stock. but I mean, it makes sense. I'm gonna go to this slide first, actually, because investing not only requires one to have any amount of meaningful savings to invest. Two, have knowledge of the major markets to know which best suits them, so stocks, forex, bonds, crypto, etc. Three, be able to keep up with all the market news. Four, have the extremely difficult skills to actually profit, let alone substantially profit, even amongst professionals. It's quite absurd to then expect everyone to attempt the investing endeavor for the sake of wealth. And in the context of the cost of living crisis and inflation, this essentially is a structural or ingrained economic damnation of the majority of global society to lifelong employeeship and or very subpar retirement. In my opinion, not only cryptocurrency but also the corporate token is a lifeline that can solve the issues of wealth creation for the financially illiterate and also incapable. So let's go back to here. So number one, have any amount of meaningful savings to invest. This is a very important part here, because when you go back here, for some people, this entire line is blocked off. This is an assumption that people are able to save and whatnot. When you understand the cost of living crisis, which essentially just means that people aren't making enough to be able to meaningfully afford the things of life, realistically speaking, these private savings are probably going to go straight back for if there's any at all. Are probably going to go back for emergency funds or whatnot, not to see whether or not they can make it up into the financial markets. So if the household makes $1 million per year, then obviously there's going to be a lot for private savings. But if the household only makes, and household could be only one person, if the household only makes $20,000 a year within the United States context, and just apply this wherever you're at, if they only make $15,000, $20,000 a year, best believe there's not going to be a whole bunch of savings. Let alone, say if they're not financially savvy, say if they don't like finances or anything like that, what's the likelihood of them being able to do that, which is in their best favor. That's why people always say, invest into index funds or your Roth IRA or 401k. They always promote these things, but they do so in a manner where people are typically ill capitalized. I'm not sure if that's the correct word, but just not properly capitalized to be able to take advantage of this type of stuff. And when we go back to number two, having knowledge of which major markets suits them best, realistically speaking, if we're talking about how to create wealth, and ideally not from the starting point of having $500,000 in your bank account to start with, just for the average person, realistically speaking, you would have to know each and every single market and which applies to them. Let's say if someone is able to save up $200 to be able to invest, stocks more than likely will not be for you. And the reason is because, they say that in a market, you should be looking for a 10 to 15% return to beat the market or whatever. So whatever the exact figure is, first of all, you have to know how to do that. Second of all, even if you do know how to do that, if you have $500 or $500, $250, whatever, 10% is $25, $50. So even if you do study everything and whatnot, if you just don't have the capital, then the stock market, very specifically, which we'll get into a little bit later, doesn't have the volatility swings that you need to be able to raise that the three-digit figure to 5, 6, 7 as people would like to do, and be able to keep up with market news. And then number 4, like I said, to expect everyone to do this is kind of ridiculous, to be able to profit, because essentially it's not that the market is necessarily zero sum, it is momentarily it is, meaning that per person who profits, a portion of the entire market has lost. So it's not necessarily a one-for-one manner, but the likelihood that anyone who's working 9 to 5 being able to do this is quite poor. But getting off of that point now. B, where is wealth? Let me just make sure. Oh yeah, cool. Oh, and yeah, I did want to talk about this as well. So, issues of wealth creation for the financially illiterate and incapable. This is important because, one, I made a point in a different article or a different video somewhere where the fallacy that we live in today's modern world is that because we all, for the most part, like literally globally now, not even just amongst Western countries, can read and write pretty much at a 99% level, we think that we're literate in everything else. And that's kind of a fallacy where we might be able to read and write English or Spanish or French, wherever you're from, but the reality is that, do you know, financially speaking, are you able to read finances and read the financial markets at the same capacity? Or are you able to do that with computers, for example? Like for me, I can't do that at all. Hence the reason with all the technical difficulties. My computer technical literacy rate is completely poor. And also the incapable, which are people who are unbanked or live in societies where it's much harder to, or capitalism is maybe disincentivized, etc. So the bigger picture here is that, we should have a society, in my opinion, where the barrier to wealth shouldn't be that you don't know this very specific area of knowledge. Why is it that if you're financially literate, you're able to achieve wealth, but if you're engineering literate, if you know how to build things with your bare hands, that doesn't mean anything in terms of being able to create 7-8 digits worth of wealth. Why is it that if you're able to create software but don't know how to sell it, then you're still at the base level? Only people, like the modern capitalist world and then the modern financialized world, only favors people who tend to have deep economic understanding, deep financial understanding, and that's very exclusive essentially. So, cryptocurrency is the absolute best financial medium to create and distribute wealth. This is because cryptocurrencies debut at the very beginning of their price cycle, and this is a in-house term, a concept that came up with. Whereas in comparison, stocks IPO way higher up within their total valuation timeline, which means that gains are unnaturally muted for the entire general public. Excuse me. The price cycle refers to the total valuation of an asset from 1, debut price, and sometimes they call it birth price, 2, apex price, and then 3, death price. So here's a little chart that I made from here. So with the price cycle, we're measuring asset valuation from inception to death, and then complete timeline of a significant market participation. So significant just means that not early enough where it's just the insiders, and then also not late enough where it's just the remnants of people who are investing into it. So like Sears, for example, would be very close to the death price compared to Snapchat or compared to Polygon. And so you'll see here, actually I think, so I'll go between this chart and here. So using basic geometry or physics, it is extremely obvious that because cryptocurrencies debut on centralized exchanges or decentralized exchanges, minimally from their initial mint price of the asset, which is $0.00, naturally so, if one can get a position in the asset early enough, they stand to make ridiculous returns relative to their initial starting capital. Whether it be the OG Bitcoiners, Ethereum holders, or meme coin supporters, it's extremely difficult to argue that a person's $100 would have been more safe in any stock on any stock exchange, in the entire world essentially. My rationale for this stance is that the idea of a risky asset or a risky market is hyper-influenced by the long-standing reign of fiat-based financial markets, which is pretty much all there's been for the past century plus, however you want to calculate that. So the reason is the financial concept of risk is a dual factor assessment and can never be assessed through a singular lens. To assess the risk of an asset, assuming one intends to hold for the long term, there needs to be a comparison of current maximum distance for conceivable all-time lows and all-time highs. As was shown on the price cycle, if someone got into a crypto project from its absolute inception, as long as the token has some genuine participation, which means that it's has real use case and not just a shitcoin, it's nearly impossible to take a loss because you entered in on the ground floor. Assuming burning happens, assuming tokens get lost or abandoned, mathematically speaking, taking a loss is impossible. And that's a reason why you'll see here that token debut price 99 times out of 100 will be lower than the death price of it. And you'll see that now even with like FTX or FTT token, I think it is for FTX, like, people still trade that. So it's even though it can die off by 99.99% because tokens can appreciate infinitely, but far more infinitely than stocks can, if you understand, that the death price if you're the very first person to get to it will always pretty much be you always have a profitable position essentially. On the flip side, however, if someone is able to enter a position on a stock from its initial IPO price, there's absolutely no guarantee that the initial price will stick. This is why a 70% drop in price usually is a death sentence for a stock, but cryptocurrencies regularly drop by 80 to 95% and still manage to 10 to 100x plus in valuation in only a few months or years later. So with this being said, stocks have lower relative ceilings than crypto, which means there's less appreciation potential, and also they have floors that are relatively further, as the drops are typically unrecoverable, which means that the pain of a decrease in valuation in the stocks is more than that in cryptocurrency, even though nominally speaking, it might be less so in stocks than it is in crypto. Thus, in my opinion, stocks are in an inferior asset class to cryptocurrency if you're looking to appreciate small amounts of capital, meaning 2 to 3 digits, maximum really like 4 digits. So just poor people, essentially, not the high net worth individuals. And we're going to talk about this IPO price here, and this is the reason why when you see, stuff in the stock market and say, oh, the stock is down 5, 8, 10%, the reason is because it's always relative to its IPO debut price, whereas in reality, its foundation price is all the way down here, but because this wasn't available on the blockchain or anything like that, this was just held between the foundation members, the team, angel investors, etc., until it gets all the way up to debut price, which is the initial time when the general public is able to invest into the corporation. So this is why when it drops, if let's say 3-4 years go by, and then we see that price is lesser than its debut price, because stocks are generally valued by how the corporation is doing, profits, revenue, assets, etc. If the price of the stock is less than when it debuts, that implies, doesn't necessarily mean, that the stock is worse off than when it originally started. Whereas cryptocurrencies, that same logic doesn't apply, because even though price has dropped, 85, 90%, if the amount of daily active users has grown by 100-fold, then from day 0 to day 1,000, let's just say, then mathematically speaking, you understand that drop is more so technical. It's not necessarily fundamental. With this established, traditional cryptocurrencies also have their flaws in terms of equitable distribution. My theory of the price cycle only works when comparing participants getting in at the ground floor, so the earliest time possible in their respective asset classes. In reality, though, most people who enter cryptocurrencies are usually entering at a premium of hundreds to literally tens of millions of multiples. In the case of Bitcoin's earliest recorded price of 0.0008, using today's price of $27,000 per Bitcoin, a single dollar from a ground floor participant, by the way, I just ate before this. Using today's price of $27,000, a single dollar from a ground floor participant is currently worth $33.75 million, but a single dollar from all-time high participant, so someone who bought at the absolute worst time, which is $69,000, is worth only 39.4 cents today. So the big question is that, in what world is this equitable? So in only 14 years, the gap between the haves and the have-nots within the Bitcoin economy has grown by a maximum value of 85.64 million fold. So you have to use maximum here because we're using the absolute earliest and the absolute latest. So the whole point being is that even though it might not be 85.64 for every single person, if it's 2 million, if it's 14 million, if it's 500,000 fold, not not just nominally fold. When is this good? When is this bad? You know what I mean? Like it's that's a ridiculous figure. Let's just say this value could only get larger would only get larger if Bitcoin breaks current all-time high price. So this is why I'm so strongly against Bitcoin evangelists such as Anthony Pompliano and Michael Saylor, is because the idea of $100,000 Bitcoin, 250K, $1 million Bitcoin mathematically guarantees there to be even further inequality due to the cap supply of Bitcoin. There's only 21 million Bitcoin, and right now there's like 19 million or so. So I don't know exactly. I think it's around 19 million. Which means that this maximum value, even as ridiculous as this is only the beginning. You know, this was at 69K. So could you imagine that at 100K, 250K, 1 million, we're talking about possibly, I'm not sure of the math here, but we could be talking close to a billion fold more. That's ridiculous. That's just crazy. And the Gini coefficient is an economic calculation that measures the level of inequality in an economy by either income or wealth. It is measured on a scale of 0 to 1, where 0 is perfect equality and 1 is perfect inequality. A very fun fact about Bitcoin is that its Gini coefficient stands at a whopping 0.88. However, the North Korean won stands at 0.86. So that just means that if we wanted a world reserve asset, it would make more sense, economically speaking, if we're looking for equitable wealth distribution, which is what a lot of the Bitcoin evangelists like to say, you know, the freedom money or whatever, it would actually make more sense to use the North Korea won than Bitcoin, which is insane. So on what planet is this excusable and a valid contender of a macroeconomic reserve asset? And so this also is very important here, because when you see people or countries like El Salvador and others, you know, adopting Bitcoin, but very specifically saying, oh, only Bitcoin, never anything else, the problem is this. It's like, would you voluntarily want to join a country where they use Bitcoin as a reserve asset, where some random person in Timbuktu back in 2013, you know, has more than your entire country? Does that make sense? Like, no. I mean, I just don't see the logical argument in that. And let me just show you guys what I mean here. Bitcoin Gini coefficient. Yeah, look at here. So this is from March 29, 2022. Wealth in crypto land is more concentrated than in North Korea, where the Gini coefficient is 0.86, and the Gini coefficient for Bitcoin is an astonishing 0.88. That is crazy. That's crazy. And you would never hear any of these Bitcoin evangelists say that. None of them. And that's the most glaringly obvious thing, and that's why it's oops, I forgot I even said it here. Although the Bitcoin white paper never states anything about being a reserve currency, gold 2.0, store value, etc., because people have perverted the fundamental use case of Bitcoin, this is the valid reasoning as to why Bitcoin's current use case is severely Ponzi-ish. So what is the alternative here? Here's where the corporate token comes in. And it's like, yeah, you see Michael Saylor, right? You see stuff like this all the time. Michael Saylor said Bitcoin is finally taking the center stage. Michael Saylor bull run. I could have sworn I just saw that. Yeah, everything is lining up for a Bitcoin bull run. Bitcoin has bottomed. We're on a bull run. And guess what? He says that all the time, and uniquely, his company owns the most amount of private Bitcoin. So it's like, it's insane how people can treat that as sensible. Anyway, firstly, let's examine the definition of a corporate token. Corporate token, a cryptocurrency that can be proven to increase in value immediately and throughout the long term due to business activity that initially existed independent of the token's creation and placement on the blockchain. The corporate token is not to be issued for the purposes of fundraising a non-functional business idea. A corporate token can prove it can exist, appreciate, and succeed solely due to non-third-party speculation and investments in relation to internal business stakeholders. The corporate token does not represent equity, profit rights, governance, nor decision-making rights of the business it represents, which is quite a lengthy definition, but it's needed for quite a few different reasons that it's not applicable for this video. But when coming up with the corporate token, I was trying to come up with a viable solution that would incorporate the extreme potential for cryptocurrencies to appreciate while eliminating latecomers, quote-unquote, holding the bag. The solution to this problem is to simply create cryptocurrencies that represent commerce, and 2, make those cryptocurrencies for pretty much every single business on the entire planet. And we were saying commerce because remember before in the presentation we said that commerce is the largest channel for consumption or consumption from households, I guess. And the reason is because, as well, we want to make cryptocurrencies for pretty much every single business is because that allows for the maximum range of trials, essentially. So you want to have as many diverse interested into creating their own cryptocurrencies for the sake of kind of like a natural selection, essentially. The solution came about because of the understanding that businesses are tangibly their own sovereign economies. Quite literally, the field of economics, this falls underneath is microeconomics. If governments can manage their currencies on a macroeconomic level, why is it that the private sector is considered incapable of doing so themselves with their own sovereign currencies on a microeconomic level? And with all the expertise in the world, decades of the smartest, quote unquote, and brightest, quote unquote, people at the United States federal government, central bank, have caused the United States government or United States dollar to depreciate by 94.3% from 2022 to 1922. And use any inflation calculator online, and you'll be able to see that's the case. Is this because managing economics is so hard, or is it that the U.S. government's interests aren't aligned with making the USD as strong as possible, and necessarily creating much wealth for its people, or is it more focused on the U.S. dollar being more dominant than other currencies? So these two are quite separate, and this is a very not light take, but it's an oversimplified take because it's quite more nuanced than that. But the whole point is that, I mentioned that in a little bit actually. In the reality of the military-industrial complex and the economically justifiable overusage of debt to fund the entire nation and world through Keynesian economics, this answer should be quite obvious. On pages 17 to 18 from the book The Economics of Time and Ignorance, which is a book that I'm currently studying, the following two quotes are found. Recently, however, it has become evident that what really separates schools of thought is, in large part, the asking of different questions. And two, recognition of the realm of subjective meaning is therefore a prerequisite for identification of the organized phenomena in which we're interested. So in layman terms, this essentially means that it is impossible to have an economic order that works for every segment of society equally and equitably, because the reasons to engage with the economy differ so greatly from individual to individual, business to business, between individual, business and government, between governments for foreign trade, etc. And the whole point is that in the same way how we understand that there's no central economy, there's no central planner that will be able to tally what every single business needs, what every single business does, like how in North Korea it is. If we understand that for business, why don't we understand that for the currency that everyone uses for their businesses? You know what I mean? And when we look at the currency side of things, globally speaking, we're all in a hyper-communist world order, essentially. The current capitalist model the U.S. follows is greatly favored for the government, businesses, and high net worth individuals, where the average and poor citizen pays for the after effects of inflation through literal currency depreciation from government, higher cost of goods and services from business, and artificially inflated asset prices, respectively, for high net worth individuals. So most significantly, I guess you can call it, is like the housing crisis, for example. It's artificial raising of prices, and that's why it's a seller's market where you can just throw any number in the air, like your Kobe or something like that, and people are gonna take it. The corporate token is designed to address businesses and individuals primarily, while also providing a favorable economic environment for governments and high net worth individuals. So this isn't like economic understanding where you're only focused on one type of people, like for example within the Great Leap Forward with China or the Russian Revolution and old Soviet era Russia. So with the corporate token, businesses are incentivized to grow the price of their tokens perpetually because of three reasons. One, so that fiat inflation / mismanagement doesn't affect business activities. Two, because business costs are based in fiat, if funds can appreciate by X% before further costs are incurred on a per unit of cost basis, the corporation will experience the sensation of reduced costs of conducting business without ever needing to literally reduce the cost of inputs, which is a huge financial innovation. And three, to compete with the appreciation of competing cryptocurrencies, of just in general, and also with their business competitors and their cryptocurrencies. But this is a very important because right now, if we're looking for profit, the regular business only has two options, which is really to find cheaper inputs or to increase the cost of their goods for on the perspective of their customers, both of which are either hard or not necessarily advantageous. But the whole point is that if you have your own business or you have your own cryptocurrency that represents your own business, the whole point is that if that cryptocurrency appreciates before you have to pay rent, on month 2, basically put, if you're withdrawing your rent from your cryptocurrency stash, that should mean, all else being equal, that your rent feels cheaper on month 2, and it would feel cheaper again on month 3, 4, and 5, even though your rent is the exact same, and even though your revenue is the exact same. So this is a third option now available with the corporate token and also with cryptocurrency. So because of those extremely strong incentives and the reality that cryptocurrencies have an immediate such global appeal via the blockchain, this means that customers and employers of said corporation actually have aligned financial interests underneath the crypto globalist economic model. Think of the relationship between symbiotic organisms like clownfish and sea anemones, or like rhinos and those like parrots or something like that. This is in polar contrast to the current relationship between the corporation, employee, and customers through the capitalist model, where it resembles much more of a toxically codependent through a marriage, where the corporation wants to pay as little to employees as possible and charge as much to customers as possible. Customers want to pay as little to the corporation as possible, and then employees want to make as much from the corporation as possible. And employees personally don't care about the customers in the slightest because they don't earn any equity from those transaction deals. So that's why it's very toxically codependent in that scenario. From a mathematical standpoint, corporate tokens ought to experience perpetual appreciation because there's a fixed supply of tokens available, but there's a constant / increasing revenue running through the business, assuming that the business is successful. This means that as long as the business decides to increase the value of its token, as long as customers and employees also own the token for purchasing goods and services and for compensation's sake, respectively, so customers for purchasing it, so using Walmart coin at Walmart or Amazon coin at Amazon, and then Amazon employees getting paid partially in Amazon coin, essentially. This means that people will not have access to an asset that'll safely grow as long as there's overall trust that the underlying business is performing well. With this explanation, the corporate token is a cryptocurrency equivalent to an IPO while minimizing the potential scamminess of ICOs and avoiding the headache. ICOs is the initial coin offering, and avoiding the headache and legal cost of setting up an STO, which is an evolution of the ICO. The STO is security token offering, which would be a pain to deal with if you have a small budget. There was some things that I wanted to see here first. But yeah, and so this is why when you look at an asset and you ask someone, is it possible for an asset to increase in value forever? People say, oh, no, never, ever. Or, people will be very weary of saying that with absolute certainty. And it's just a mathematical question. It's in the same way how there's certain companies that can exist for hundreds of years just because they were able to make profit. In the same case, if you only have 1 million coins, or 1 million coins in the year 2020, and the year 2080 comes around, and you still only have 1 million coins, but your business is still around, what should happen to price? And then that's kind of what it's saying here. So corporate tokens benefit stakeholders in the following order: 1, businesses; 2, customers and employees; 3, third-party market participants, or TPP; and then 4, governments through relieved welfare expenditure. So TPP is also important to calculate because this represents everyone else on the blockchain / the investing public who are interested in making returns without ever knowing about or caring about the underlying business at all. So in the scenario that a business could inject $1 million of funds into their token on an annual basis, this would pop up on global crypto scanners and would virtually certainly, guarantee that outside investors will be interested in a minimally contested asset as a business, customers, and employees, which should be the largest holders of the earliest tokens, which is very important to measure. So similar to how you guys are the largest holders of our tokens, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone who comes along next, let's say, for example, if someone comes along with $10,000 and buys our token, even though, yes, they technically have more money in a fiat sense, because they came way after all of us, they still are underneath us within the totem pole of how many watch to earn or how much Faucet you earn, because there's only cap supply. So that's why it works in a sequential order. Yes, and the biggest holders essentially have little incentives to ever dump, or else all else being equal. And yeah, which is, as long as the business is thriving, why would you ever dump tokens? Like, you can partially sell your token, to cash out or to reinvest, but to ever dump would be kind of nonsensical here. I also want to talk about TPP. So we experienced TPP, and it's very relevant to the business strategy. Because what TPP is, it's essentially people seeing on the blockchain that, oh, this asset is increasing in value, so that means that maybe I should be able to get in, so for a quick trade or whatnot. So when we were earlier, and right now I'm still working on price. Right now the trading stuff is, I had a bad week and a half, so it's still working, but it's a process. Trust the process. But we had one person, and I hate PooCoin because it has this large, I don't know why the chart is that high. We had one person here, as I told you before, they had, I think, 17,000 watch to earn, give or take, back in June of last year, and they sold it here. And then we had one other person, here it was, in November of last year. I forgot how much they bought, but then they eventually sold. So the whole point is that if we had regular revenue, regular revenue that's being bought or that's being used to purchase more watch to earn from the market, let's just pretend it was $100 per day or $500, $1,000 per day, however much it would be. If someone were to invest a singular $500 into there, from the perspective of the business, that's a free $500 to be able to use within your corporation. So if your costs were only $1,000, pretend, as well for math's sake, for the business, if you got that $500 from someone else who's interested in appreciating their capital, you'll be able to run that month worth of business for half cost. So it means that either instantaneously you have far more profit, or instantaneously you'll be able to reduce the cost of your goods for your customers to make your business way more appealing compared to your competitors. And so that's why we're just waiting for our first. We do have trading as our first revenue source, but still, and it's a little shaky, needs some time to develop. But you understand how this is a very, very extremely advantageous business strategy to have. And I think once people are recognizing that, they will do that. And lastly speaking, I want to see coin market cap. Remember, cryptocurrency is Web3. So right now there's only 24,000, roughly 25,000 cryptocurrencies in existence within the first 14 years. However, how many websites are there in the world? There's 1.13 billion. So when you do the math on that, 1.13 billion divided by 24,600 roughly, we get roughly 46,000 fold. So meaning the sum of Web 1 and Web 2 is roughly 46,000 fold more advanced than Web 3. So we have lots and lots and lots of time before cryptocurrency ever gets up to where that is. But because of that, this is an amazing opportunity for everyone who's early within cryptocurrency to make literally never before seen levels of wealth. Than ever before, I guess. But yeah, so that's basically it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time.